Hello and welcome to episode number 17 of Tour Talk. This week you're stuck with just Nate and myself. However, we're here to entertain you by getting deep into the gritty topic of ego within the music industry. We draw from personal experiences of handling our own egos at times, as well as what we've encountered whilst being on the road. We also discuss our different approaches to instigating our creative processes and how different times of the day can really impact that, which eventually leads us into cultural variances around the world and our preferences of how different countries approach putting on shows. The episode kicks off by discussing our experiences of how to get a foothold in the music industry, where essentially we had to overcommit ourselves working a regular job and then utilising whatever spare time we had around that to facilitate our passion. I think it's a trial that the majority of artists in all fields go through and eventually allows you to reach a point where all you have to focus on is your art. New episodes of Tour Talk go live every Monday, so please subscribe, comment and like if you enjoy what you hear, and help us spread the word by continuing to share this with anyone you think will enjoy. This is Tour Talk.
Thinking back on it now, it's just like I don't mind being relentless with something that I really care about, but then like splitting 60% of your time doing something you don't care about, it's an unsustainable way to live.
No, completely. I think it's one of those things where like you earn the right to do what you're doing by pushing yourself further than most people are willing to go. You're like, I care about this enough that for 3 months, 6 months, you literally
almost a year. I mean,
you worked 16 hours a day. You worked job, and then you went and made a record, and then you slept, and you just did the same for an extended amount of time until you got yourself in a place where people cared enough about the record that you didn't have to go and burn the candle at both ends with work. I think that's what sets some people apart from others when it comes to creating something artistically.
Yeah, and I totally don't think. I think if you could figure out a way, like I definitely don't knock the. I know there's a lot of people that have a day job, but it's very structured in the sense that like they go in at 9, it's done at 5, and then from 5:30 p.m. to midnight, they have all those hours to work on the thing that they're passionate about, trying to transition out of it. I think that's also that's not a stupid way to do things either.
I'm not going to lie, like, because essentially that's what I've been doing during this whole lockdown period is working regular hours. And I found it way harder because you know that I like to get stuff done in the morning and however, like having to go to work first and do all of that and then come home and try and push myself to be creative or sit down and learn a piece on guitar or like practice some lap steel. I found that much harder because I'm done. Like I'm actually drained at the end of the day and like I find it harder to push myself and I get frustrated with it, but it's just realistic, unfortunately. I mean, I'm not getting any younger either. But
right.
You know.
But you feel most creative in the morning?
Oh yeah. Like especially thought process wise, like within the first 30 minutes of waking up, I want to be sat down with a notebook, writing stuff and thinking about stuff, and 100%.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel a spurt of it maybe from like 10 to 12, and then I feel the most creative at like 10 p.m. Always. Wow. It's just always like at night. But I've been trying to I've been trying to experiment a little bit with doing it in the morning and in the afternoon.
I'm in bed by 10 o'clock these days. So
yeah.
Nothing creative is happening.
The last couple weeks I've done it too, and I don't dislike it, but I don't really feel as creative.
For me, it's the quietest time of the day in the morning. Nobody's bugging you. Nobody else is up. Nobody's about. So like you have a clear passage of time to have a thought process that isn't going to get interrupted by anything else. That's what works for me.
Yeah. I'm just, fuck, man. I really wish I was. I wish I was a morning person. I do like the morning, but I also naturally am just like, my brain, something about my brain at nighttime, it's just like the gears start
There is no
again.
right or wrong.
No, of course, but I think it would be really nice to be like, all right, I can naturally wake up at 6 or 7,
Mm-hmm.
and you have that. It is peaceful. You get to watch the sun come up. You have coffee. You feel
Yeah.
good, and then you're like going. And then I always feel like I don't know. Yeah, I guess it just changes. Who
Yeah.
knows?
I was never like that. I mean, especially in the midst of working all the time. I mean, I would go to bed late and get up late, and it just that was how it was naturally. And I don't know why I was afraid of like just going to sleep early. It felt like I'd be missing out on something. Turns out it was just complete shit. It's just a weird mental process that I had.
I I think I tend to romanticize it a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I do like the idea of like getting like going on a drive at night, um
Mm-hmm.
and the streets are empty, and there's this weird sad solitude quiet about it that's very similar to the morning. It's the juxtaposition. The morning is like bright and hopeful and
Yeah, yeah.
full of possibilities, and at nighttime it's kind of like you've experienced the day, and it's a little more sad.
I think if you were walking around the city getting inspiration, then I could totally understand that because there is a definite thing about cities at night or like or super early in the morning, but you're just sat in your apartment. Either way, sat at a mic trying to write a song. So unless you can actually feel that difference in vibe just because it's a certain time of day, does that
Yeah.
really make a difference?
I don't know. I mean, truthfully, the first time so when I was doing a DJ gig, I would DJ from 10 p.m. to 4 or 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I'd drive home sometimes as the sun was coming up, but there was a definite time between like 4 and 6 a.m. where the city is empty, especially
Yeah.
DC, city like Washington D.C. Because DC is such a political kind of commuter city that like there's only one or two places literally open in the entire city.
Mm-hmm.
So I would find some really, especially on a summer night, windows down, driving, and the city's dead quiet. It's just there's something really beautifully lonely about that. Like
Yeah.
it's nice.
It's that whole
Um,
twilight period, but there is something in the air at that kind of time.
yeah,
There is a
it's
tension. It's a weird, quiet tension that.
yes, it's weird. And then the next time I really experienced it, shortly after when I was in Manchester, even before the actual shutdown,
Mm-hmm.
walking back from a couple of the open mic nights at we'd drink, and it would be 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
and something about the wet, dark stuff is shuttered up, but there's some neon lights. But the street lights are very sparse. It's not like in DC where like the street lights illuminate the whole block. It's kind of
Yeah.
like there's a lot of shadows, and weaving your way back to a hotel through that experience was that was also a very it's inspiring in just this weird way. I don't know. I don't want
I
to
th-
make it too romantic, but
no, but I think British cities are very different from American ones because everything in America is very linear. Like all the cities are very linear, but like especially like an older city like Manchester,
the
there's a
northern
lot
quarter's windy. Yeah,
windy and there's back alleys and there's little shortcuts and there
right.
is something a little romantic about that, like in the evening walking home and stuff.
Yeah. Greece and Athens and Thessaloniki
Yeah.
are very much like that in the sense of like. But the funny thing is, in Greece, it's kind of like the daytime is fuck bonkers busy, like
Mm-hmm.
crazy vibrant, and then and then at night it also is too. Like it's funny because people talk about New York City. New York City has that old reputation of like the city that never sleeps, but
Yeah.
truly the only place I've ever been that's true is Athens.
No, but those guys sleep at like 2 in the afternoon for a couple of hours because it's too hot to do anything else. Like that whole kind of Spanish siesta thing. Like they laugh at English people who are like out in the sun at like midday or 1 o'clock because it's so
Yeah.
hot that the whole town shuts down for like 3 or 4 hours and then they just go later into the evening.
Yeah, Athens is really just 24/7. I've just never been to a place that's like that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
It's
And you love that?
truly. I did love it because I like places where I think for the most part in America, especially in your major city hubs, even though they're major cities, New York has a little bit more of the charm, but like even LA, Los Angeles shuts down
Down, yeah. Like,
like 2 in the morning, except for like a little section of West Hollywood. Like the city's sleeping.
but you can't buy alcohol. Some places stay open, but they don't serve alcohol after 2 o'clock.
Right,
I think it's after
exactly.
2. It blew
Yeah,
my
there's a
mind
lot
the
of
first
places
time I
like
was
that.
there.
I mean, DC shuts down. I think the last drink that can legally be served is like 2, right? On the
Wow.
dot. So it's really interesting as a more I mean, I'm not saying I am this, but someone who leans a little more bohemian, a little more on my
Mm-hmm.
own schedule. It's nice, I think, sometimes to go to a city where there is no schedule. It's total it's total freedom. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, I woke up at 2 in the afternoon. Is there a place that serve? That's the charm, right, of like New York City is that it's like there are diners that are open 24 hours a day.
Yep.
So you can be on any schedule you want and still enjoy the same things that you would. And Athens is very much like that. There's bars that are serving booze at 9 a.m. because the party is continuing.
Yeah. I think that's what I think amazes a lot of Americans when they come over to Europe. And because a lot of those countries have like a shutdown period in the middle of the day because of the heat, stuff doesn't start till really late in the evening. Like you don't go for dinner till like 10 o'clock, which means that you
Yeah.
don't really hit a bar till 12 o'clock, which means you're not really in the midst of your party till 4, 5 a.m. And like,
Yeah.
I think that blows a lot of Americans' minds when they come to Europe. And a
Correct.
lot of them love it because there is that sense of freedom with it.
Yeah. Some people hate it. The service is slower, but I'll never forget the time performing on the island of Icaria, which is in the Aegean Sea, um, very close to Turkey and Cyprus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a Greek island. Just very. It's a 10-hour boat ride from Athens. It's an hour and a half flight. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of the Aegean Sea. There's nothing. I mean, it is cut off,
Mm-hmm.
and they're on a time. Because it gets so hot in the summer, and that their timetable. The first place that opened for breakfast truly was between 2 and 4 p.m. Breakfast. The first coffee place that was open to sit down at and get served was 2 and 4 p.m. And then I believed it all shut down. That service shuts down from 4 to 8,
Mm-hmm.
5 to 8. There's nothing. And then 8 p.m. is when people are eating their like late lunch. And then midnight is dinner.
How
It was
did you
crazy.
feel about that? Did that work for you?
I
Yeah, of
loved
course
it.
you did.
Yeah, I loved it because it was it was just crazy. I mean, I also like places that there's no expectation, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the expectation for the day was lay on the beach and hang out.
Yeah.
I mean, to me that's just I don't know. You
You're
could tell
getting wistful.
yeah, you could tell I've been just stuck in
The really
the
difficult
house.
thing on tour though is that you will go from countries that have like a normal schedule or a regular one, and then you'll land in Spain or Portugal,
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden you've got to do a show at 4 a.m. and then you've got to be on a flight at 8 or 9 a.m. and
yeah,
then
yeah,
doing
yeah.
a show the next day at a normal time. So you might go through like a 24, 48-hour period where you don't sleep at all. Like we did it with Eagle Eye in the Azores, where I mean, I actually think I flew in a day early, but the band landed on the day of the show and they slept in the afternoon for a bit if they could. Then we did we sound checked, and then you've got nothing to do all day, and then you've got to turn up gig ready at 4 a.m. do the show, and then try and figure out how to. Then you've got to fly back to Portugal to go and do the next show somewhere else, and it's fun, and it's amazing to see people partying on an island in the middle of the Atlantic at 4 a.m. in the morning. But
Right.
like logistically, from working and trying to put on a show, like that's tricky.
But
Fun,
right,
tricky.
so that's from like a clerical standpoint, it's a nightmare. A logistic standpoint, it's a nightmare. But from a vibe standpoint,
Oh yeah,
there's nothing better than like the promoter in Spain being like, we're supposed to start a half hour ago, but let's let a few more people get into the show first.
yeah,
And then they inevitably do come. It's inevitably better.
yep.
Yeah, I think it's the adage when in Rome, right? I mean, just you got to just go. That's also part of this lifestyle is going with the flow.
Oh,
I mean,
100%.
We've talked a million times about what a nightmare stuff is and how you have to just pivot as you're going. And to me, it's like that's also the beauty of it is it teaches you that who gives a shit? I mean, right? Like at the end of the day, if it starts at midnight or it starts at 4, what?
The thing is, like, it always gets done. It always happens. It's always fine, and then it's a story afterwards. So like, it's never really an issue. It's not great at the time, especially if somebody hasn't slept properly, like part of the band or whatever, and then you've got to be encourageable, try to get the best out of them for the show or whatever.
Sure.
But then them being miserable on the way back is also a lot of fun too for everybody else. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. At this point, after what we've went through this last year,
Oh,
I'll never complain about anything. You'll
Ne-
never. I'm serious. You will
This
never
is on
hear
video.
me say it is. I will never bitch about catering. I will never bitch about the time of the show. Anything. I don't care if there's 30 people there or 300. You've heard it here.
I'm gonna get this snapshot of Rob, and I'm gonna carry it around on my phone in a special little, really easy accessible file. And anytime
Yeah.
you get it close,
Yes.
bang,
Yeah.
there you go.
No, I understand that I'm insane, but I do feel like I am generally very grateful to play.
Oh, I
You
will
know,
give you that.
I feel like I'm always very grateful to play, and I never look at it as being sad about something being small, a small
No.
show or a big show. I'm very happy to be there, but I will never. I should say this: I will complain. I lie,
I know.
but I will not take the situation for granted ever again. Never again will I be like just thinking it's so run of the mill to
Yep,
be playing a show in Spain, because it's all been taken away.
we're getting there though. There's a little light.
It feels like for the first time in a year and a month that there is a little bit of light at the end of
A
the
little
tunnel. It
light.
feels like some shows are starting to get announced.
I will say this: there's gonna be some ups and downs still to go through. What I
For
think,
a year. I think for
yeah,
a
I
year.
agree. I think there are going to be waves of stuff where things have to calm back down a little, but I think in general stuff will happen. There is stuff to look forward to. We can almost start planning stuff, and I think at least that for me is enough to get me through
Right.
the ups and downs of what might be the next 6 to 9 months or whatever. Having genuine conversations about shows that might actually happen instead of, can we just rearrange this, or we're not even having these discussions, or nobody's looking at doing anything for the next 6 months. Now people, especially promoters and booking agents, are optimistic. And people are buying tickets, which is really cool. I think that's one, they have faith that something will happen, and they are proving that they genuinely want and there is a demand for shows again, and they want to get back to it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think I imagine what we're seeing is a lot of signs of good intention.
Sure.
I think we have to reset. I've been spending some time on this app called Clubhouse. It's fucking abysmal. I mean, it's just a terrible way to spend time. But there's a few, just like anything else on social media. There's a few forums that are very insightful, and
Mhm.
as they say on that app, they say we're gonna reset the room when things start getting convoluted. The moderator of the room, the chat room, always says, "All right, folks, we're gonna take a minute to reset the room." I think that's what we're seeing now. I think we're seeing the fact that shots are happening, things are gonna be okay,
Mhm.
and we're gonna move to a situation where we're resetting. We're getting back in the mindset. I mean, for instance, I was thinking about this today. I was out on a running through DC, and I live near this area called Barracks Row. It's a strip near a Marine barracks that is just restaurants and bars. And now they've converted most of the indoor seating. It's all outdoor now. And it was busy today.
That's cool.
I mean, it was socially distanced.
Yeah.
But it was busy. People were out. And I think I thought about it. I guess I was just like trying to internalize what that was. And it felt so weird to think about sitting down at a restaurant. 'Cause I haven't done it literally in a year. I have not gone into a restaurant and sat down to eat. I haven't done it. So I think maybe 2 or 3 times total I've sat in a very secluded outdoor setting. And it's not virtue signaling, by the way. It's just that as a singer, I was terrified to get COVID. I just didn't know what the repercussions were going to be, so I was extra cautious. And it's going to take people a while to get back into the mindset of doing things, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and
there's
being
people
around people.
I mean, I can't tell you
sounds
how many times
ridiculous,
I've been
but
watching a movie. Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but I've been watching a movie or a TV show, and I see people like in a car, a taxi together, and I'm like, what? It's like jarring. It's like, what the fuck are they doing? And then it's like, oh, I've been conditioned, and now I have to kind of relearn.
Yeah. Do you think you'll be cautious, or will you throw yourself in at the deep end with all of this?
I think now, regardless of a vaccine or not, I think there is no being cautious anymore. I don't know how you...
Okay.
I think you... Being cautious. I think you will, for years to come, will have to wear a mask in most places, in most settings. Like an airplane or whatever. I think there's going to be certain protocols, and then aside from that, I don't know how you can be cautious against the next thing, because they're already talking about the next thing. So it's like, I just don't know how you be more safe than have a vaccine, wear a mask, and follow whatever rules there are.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, and I personally, although I will respect everybody else's approach to it, kind of want to immerse myself in people again, because I've missed that, being in a busy place or that buzz and that vibe. Like, I am ready for that completely.
I think everyone is.
Yeah.
It's just you know,
when
when
people
you
aren't,
are,
I get that and I understand that, and I'm happy
when
to
you're
give their distance, but
yeah, I just mean when you're following safety protocols, you're also doing it out of respect for other people.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about what you want, but I see it. I think we're gonna be back up and running soon. I really hope so, and then we can start to talk about Brexit and how that will affect touring.
So just before we get into, I actually had picked out a topic for today before we went meandering on about whatever we've just been doing.
Okay, well, listen. We have another 25 minutes.
Sure.
So
firstly, I mean, in terms of how this first spate of guests has gone, like, are you surprised at how much you've enjoyed it, or how good the conversations have been, or is there anything lacking?
No. I think everyone's been great. I like it. I mean, I feel like a guest on the show. You know what I mean? In a way, and I imagine, much like with other people in their own industries, I like talking with people who do what we do.
Yeah.
Because I like what we do. So we've had I think the different types of guests that we've had on so far has been really interesting, and I think it's going to keep moving in that direction. It's been cool. I mean,
we've had some very different conversations, and I think one of the cool things is that you can see, everybody's love of what we do in different ways, but you can see, especially like with somebody like Tobe, who we've both been on tour with, that there is this bond with somebody that hopefully people will start understanding, and this is why we do it. Yeah,
we started off the episode by laughing for 5 minutes straight, you know? And I think at the end of the day, these situations are just like, this is more, I'm hoping it's more about, I love talking to these people. That's a
Yep.
given for me. So I hope it's about somebody else listening that might not have known who that person was or what that person's job is in the industry.
Yeah.
And then they can kind of learn about it. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, in all honesty, we are still in lockdown. So what the fuck else are we going to do? Like, literally, this is the option.
I feel like that is your fallback reason for doing this show. Is like, I've got nothing better to do. As much as
It
I
is,
like
it's
talking to
true.
you and everything else, but I've got nothing else to do, so I may as
It's
well
true.
be doing it.
I think it's true. I mean, you've talked about putting this kind of thing together for a long time, and I've always agreed that it was a good idea. But let's be honest. Once things start back up, you're never going to hear from me again.
I
And you're
hope.
going to have to, yeah, you're going to have to, I also think, I think it's fun, especially when we talk to somebody like Lucinda, who there's not a lot of people talking about from her perspective in all these music podcasts.
Completely.
So I think she's bringing something fresh to the table. I think Dan, who's like performed in two of the bigger acts in the UK. I mean, Skindred and Badly Drawn Boy are huge. That's a big band.
Yeah. Yep.
Both acts are really big, so it's kind of like, all right, so now you have the perspective of a guy who does it on the highest level. Like, what are his takes on it? And then we talked to somebody like Toby, who we've toured with on a much more lower mid level, venues and tour and situations, and somebody like Dan Reed, who's been doing it for like 30 years. It's longer. I mean, it's fuck.
Yeah. No, I hope people are getting a good insight to the whole spectrum of the industry and what exactly goes on. So I think we're doing all right.
I think it's fine.
I think
That's the most British thing I've ever said.
it is.
You're like, oh, this is great, and I'm like, it's fine.
It's fine.
We're doing fine. We're doing a fine job.
All right, here's what I want to talk about today.
Let's get in.
Can we discuss what it's like handling your own ego in a touring scenario and the egos of other people, whether they be in the band or the crew or what else, and how difficult it is to juggle those things? Like, I think especially from your point of view, being somebody who's led a band and stuff and is a singer in a band, there's like, you have to have some sort of ego to get there and drive you, but at the same time, there are times where people might not take kindly to that. I think there's stuff that I want to kind of get out of this as well. So I think it's an interesting point for people to actually hear about from the source.
Ego. Oh, this is so
I know.
layered.
I know.
Ego is quite interesting because it gives you perspective of. It's two things very clearly to me. The first thing is that an ego is the constant, it's a battle, it's a constant recognition about, so I think ego psychologically comes from a place to, it allows oneself to protect oneself.
Okay.
So I think if you take this like back to cavemen and women,
Mm-hmm.
I think if you take this really far back psychologically, I think what the ego does is it gives you a sense of individuality that allows you to literally protect yourself from the harms of the physical world
That's deep.
and of the emotional world. Does this make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so-
you can keep explaining for sure, though.
Okay, so I think if you're looking at it like textbook wise, I think a big component of ego is to not always sacrifice yourself for the greater good in the sense of like humanity, because it allows you to do all the things that is like ingrained in your DNA to push humanity forward, like procreation, hunting, protection, all the things that like give you this individual idea that you're like not part of a greater good, if that makes sense. So
Okay.
like the group mentality is great is also needed for like the survival of bigger numbers. But the survival of self, you need ego because it gives you confidence and it gives you self-awareness and it gives you the ability to take away the fear.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like, I'm sure this sounds insane. Whoever's listening to this clearly thinks I'm mentally ill, but I'm gonna.
You just need to tie it into touring and being in a band, and you'll have nailed
I'm going
it.
to. I'm going to. So I think on a very at the ground level of an ego, I think it's balancing the individual from the group, and what it's doing is, I think, for instance, if you're like this person who lives in a cave, and you're like, I have to go climb this mountain to hunt this food. In the sense, you need an ego, right, to be like, I can do that.
Yeah.
I'm scared of it. I'm scared for good reason. But what suppresses that fear of like fighting an animal to survive is an ego. It's allowing you to think you can do it.
Completely.
Now, the problem is the battle in an ego, and I'll tie this into what it means in a group. The battle in the ego is that you also do need the group. You need the people that also live in the cave with you to like be able to. It's part of a bigger ecosystem. You have to go out. You have to hunt the food, and when you bring it back, there's somebody who's going to skin it. There's somebody who's going to cook it.
Yep.
There's somebody who's going to clean up after. Everybody has their role. So it's this constant balance of believing that you can do the things you're afraid to do, and that ego is protecting you from the fear being crippling you from doing the thing that you know you need to do to survive. But then also, when the ego becomes too great and you lose the sense of connectivity with community or universe, what the ego then does is tell you you don't need anybody else.
Yeah.
And what it then does is it cuts you off from the things you need to actually go further. So in this really convoluted way, ego is a weapon. But it's like, to me, it's like having a very powerful gun that gives you the confidence to hit the target. But if you don't understand what you're doing with that weapon, it will hurt you and will hurt other people around you. It's very dangerous.
I think
very dangerous.
A really good job with this. Well done. I think you've done
I had a lot of coffee today.
You've done a really good job with this, and I can really relate to a lot of what you've said. And I'm intrigued to know, like, your experience with handling your own ego and like where you've used it to kind of progress yourself, because I think that's what you need to do. You need to have that belief in yourself that you're able to do it. But then if there's actually been any instances where you've maybe looked back and gone, actually, I've probably gone too far with that, or I need to, I don't know whether you ever actually have admitted that, or you've realized that you've reeled it in over time, or you know how to utilize your ego better than what you did maybe when you were younger, or
100%. I think your ego when you're younger is basically like, it's like the middle, it's holding its middle finger up to everyone.
Yeah.
And that you have something to prove, so you feed your ego. It's like this for me. I still get very nervous to perform. To this day, very nervous. In fact, the more intimate the setting, the more actually nervous I am.
Yeah, because you can hear everything, yeah.
Oh, man, just like doing the whiskey jar for the first time for me was like gut-wrenching. Like, I remember going outside to warm up, and I was like, this is, like, what am I doing? This is fucking insane. But then, like, going on, to do those Wolf Mother shows last 2 summers ago, just going up with an acoustic guitar and there's 1,000 people in the crowd, it was kind of like, all right, well, it's a sea of nothing, not like the individual. So I think when you're younger, your ego, you feed your ego and it feels really good. And then I think you need as you're younger, you need more blind confidence to do a lot of stupid things that will then inform you when you're older. It's what's right and what's wrong is in terms of.
Sure.
But I still get very nervous to perform, and there's basically always this internal struggle where I'm like, you're such a piece of shit. Like, you're going to fuck this up. Like, you can't do this. You're going to hit a bad note. You didn't prepare as much as you should have. I beat myself up a lot, and that's not healthy either. And the balance then, I think a healthy balance is then your ego kind of steps up and says, no, you've done this a million times. You know what you're doing, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't good enough to be here, most likely.
Yeah, completely.
And but if you don't have both of those things, I think that's quite bad, because then what happens is you're constantly telling yourself you deserve to be here and you should be here, and it gets unhealthy.
Well, I think what happens, and probably what I did personally, was that you end up becoming your ego for a while. Like, you're not actually that's a part of you, and that's a thought process that's going through your head. But I think for a time period, me specifically, I think I definitely became my ego for a little while, and because it had helped me progress and it had helped me move on, and I was achieving a lot of stuff, but then it pushed me way too far, and I took on more than I could handle, and as a result, like, things kind of fell apart a little bit for me because of that. So I kind of learned that I needed to reel that in a bit, and I didn't have to be like that all the time, and that I could actually use it when needed.
It's a tool.
Completely, and I think that's what I had to learn. So for me, I was on tour in the States working for a band as like an assistant tour manager, band assistant, whilst also booking shows in the UK and being the promoter and the booking agent and the manager of this band who was going on a tour, and trying to do both jobs at the same time. Mainly because in my head I was like, I can do this and I can do that, and of course I can run both things at the same time, and everything will be fine, and I'll be great because of it, and then I can move on to the next level and the next level.
Yeah.
And that was way too much for me. Way too much. And I think, and then I made terrible decisions personally because of that, or partly because of that. And I think at that point I kind of learned that I needed to take a step back from making decisions based on my ego purely and not common sense.
Yeah, I think your ego, it tells you that you're the greatest.
Yeah.
And I think you have to argue with that.
At least
quite
reason.
A bit.
At least reason and be like, you can't do this, but you need to be. You can't do this all the time forever.
Right, and I think it goes back to climbing, the analogy of climbing a mountain or hunting food, or whatever shit that cavemen did. I think that's the thing, is that life is so nuanced and multifaceted, is that you're not always hunting. True. Sometimes you're cleaning up at the cave, and sometimes you're planning the hunt. And when you're planning the hunt, in no way should you have ego involved in it. It should be all logical, all logic. It's just interesting, I guess, bringing it back to what you said before, like in a group dynamic and relating it to music.
Yeah.
It's
because every artist has an ego, and you've all done the same thing to get to that level of where you're at.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, man. It is a balancing act, because you don't ever really know where it's coming from. Like you do know when you're with the right group of people, you do know when there's no ego involved. And it's very apparent and very clear. But ego is so interesting, because also it comes from a place where, like, let's say in your personal life, things are if you have someone in your personal life who's always doubting your decisions, when you get into a group scenario musically, it could be a situation where you're like, no one ever listens to me at home, so I'm going to push this idea here because it makes me feel vindicated, or like it feeds your ego. There's thousands of different scenarios like that. Where.
So how have you managed to balance it in a group scenario? Like, have you ever actually achieved it, or there must be like moments and pockets in time where like
Yeah,
everybody syncs up and
yeah,
then it's a great
yeah.
ride. But then there is
I
obviously
think for the most part, yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, my experience in Lionize was very ego-less.
okay.
I mean, as a group, I
Mhm.
think, I think very much for the majority of all interactions that we had, no one was trying to make a decision that made them look better than the whole.
Mhm.
Um, and that's what it comes down to in a group. Is it the best decision? I mean, it's so simple too. It's so basic. Is it
Yeah.
like, does this song need a drum solo? Does this song need a 15-minute? Justifying why a song needs something should only ever be about what makes the song the best
better.
song,
Yep.
not what makes that person stand out.
Mhm.
Because if you're a great musician, you're going to stand out,
Oh, completely, yeah.
period. So,
Mhm.
but I have seen it. I've seen egos on tour,
Well, this
man,
is where
in
it
other
really
bands.
I really wanted to get to is eventually like when you're on tour, especially with a group of people that you don't know so well, that you're there to work with for a finite amount of time,
Right.
and say you're the support band, and then the band who's toured is like they're quite manipulative of like what you're allowed to do on stage or like what you're able to use or how much space you're allowed or all that kind of stuff that essentially must boil down to ego and protecting their own show.
Well, I think that's two different things, though. I think the ego part comes when you see poor behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If a band is restricting stage space, while my ego doesn't like it
Mm-hmm.
because I am feeling lesser for it, a lot of times the truth is that's just what makes their
Yeah,
show the best show.
completely.
And they're the headliner. They've sold the tickets. It's 100% logic to me at that point. That's all fair game.
Agreed.
But then it gets to stuff like where backstage certain things become restricted
Mm-hmm.
and scenarios backstage where you can see that there's an individual that wants to be treated differently.
Yep.
And not out of safety reasons, not out of anxiety. You're seeing it because it's ego.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't
I've
have to
seen
be
it.
specific, but like, if you got any instances that like stand out of.
Oh my fucking god, dude! Never ending. Just like I remember at a festival we played one time in the UK. We were warming up. It was a crazy heavy metal festival, one of my favorites ever, Bloodstock. And backstage there are trailers, and the trailers are basically single trailers divided with a thin wall between two.
They're like cabins, aren't they? They're like
exactly
cabins. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But two bands per one trailer.
Yep.
And you have, I think you have like on this stage, you had a 3-hour window in your trailer. An hour before the set, you had your set, and then an hour after to whatever.
Yep.
And anyone that I travel with for sure, especially in Lionize, I mean, I think you've spent a lot of time with us backstage. Like, we're mellow. There's not it's never a case where people are screaming or carrying on. It's very, very relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe 15 or 20 minutes before stage, half hour before stage time, people warm up. There's always a drum pad. There's a little guitar warming up. There's bass. There's some vocal stuff. But I would say that it's very routine and it's in a very short window. And you could not really describe it as anything intrusive to me.
And that's completely normal because every band in the world warms up before they go on stage.
If you're not doing that, you're something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
so it's a completely normal thing to do.
Yeah, dude. So we were warming up one time and we hear this really loud the band that was on after us, I'm not going to say who they were.
Yeah.
I guess you could go look at the schedule if you really wanted to look it up and see, but we hear this pounding on the door. And they were like, the funniest part was that it was this super death metal, like super scary, unre- Ill- illegible logo and pictures with the sickle and the death goats and all that really stupid shit. And this guy knocks on the door. We open the door and he's like, "Excuse me, we're next door and we're trying to relax.
Oh, wow.
We're trying to we just got in and we're trying to relax before our set." Now, mind you, this was a half hour before our set, hour-long set, and then a half hour, and then they were on. Okay, so 2 hours? And we were like, yeah, man, like, no, it's going to stop in 10 minutes because we're going to stage. And he said something to the effect like, "It's so fucking rude. Like, you're so fucking rude."
Wow.
Now, to me, that was probably the worst scenario of ego that I have ever seen. Like, I can't imagine a scenario where I would knock on someone else's door that was closed and be like, "Do you mind keeping it down? Like, we're at a music festival." What? Like, literally, it's so loud outside that you couldn't hear yourself.
Yeah.
And the thing that we were doing was upsetting to them. So that's just one of like 100 things that you see where people are just like, they take. Here's another part of ego: you take yourself really seriously.
Yeah.
That's it. If you take yourself so seriously that you can't be flexible in the moment of like, just that's the worst case. I mean, have you experienced? I'm sure you can't even talk about half the things you've experienced with ego, but
one of the funniest ones that I've had to deal with is being berated by a band I was working for not getting them the same bottled water as the headline act.
Wow.
And the simple basics of it is that the headline act were drinking Fiji water, which is like $3-4 a bottle or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Which is really expensive if you've got to buy enough water for a full band and crew. So you need like 40 bottles a day, and just simple math is that your catering budget that you're being allocated doesn't cover $4 bottles of water.
Yeah, $200 a day on water is bananas.
So I got called out one time for not buying the same water as the headline act. That was one of the craziest things that I think I've experienced. I'm assuming on the behalf of ego.
Yeah, dude, I don't see an.
But I've learned that these are like part of me. My ego wanted me to be there on these tours in the first place, so I thought it was really cool. But now, like, I just want to work with people who will drink a bottle of water regardless. Like, this is kind of what I've learned off the back of all of it, is that I just want to go and have fun and work with people I like, and where this kind of stuff isn't really involved anymore. That's my lesson from all of that.
I think if you can learn to harness the ego and use it as a tool that allows you to conquer your fear and self-doubt in situations where you know it could be beneficial to you, then I think it's a very good thing to have and to utilize.
Yep.
And I think if your sole purpose is serving that ego, then I think you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, especially during this whole lockdown time, I tried to read quite a lot and learn about some of this stuff and reflect on it. So for a part of that whole lockdown, I tried to like box off the ego and put it to one side and be like, I don't want to get involved with that again, because it got me to some difficult positions for sure.
Sure.
But then it got me to a lot of great places. I just kind of abused or overused it, essentially. So it gave me a lot of drive to get to work in some amazing places for some amazing people and do a lot of stuff that I like doing. It's just tempering all of that, I think, is the balance. So I think it's really interesting from someone who fronts a band, because you are the focal point. And a lot of people expect people to have grand personalities and big egos and be quite domineering over other acts. And I don't know whether it's really like that. I kind of wanted to break that down a little bit and just
I think it's a performance too. You have to realize that
Yeah.
you're a
You're a
performing
character.
artist. Yeah, you're. It's not necessarily you're a character in the sense that like you're there to convey a feeling to people.
Hmm.
So once the set's done, you don't have to continue to convey those things to people.
Sure.
You know, and yeah, it's just it's a drug in a sense, right? It's like I would imagine using some other drugs where it's like you have to use them very sparingly
I mean, you don't
because
have to imagine using other drugs.
they, they do give you confidence, right? And they
Hmm.
do give you this rush of adrenaline and this self-assured power. But if you start using it too much, it becomes your entire personality and it goes off the rails and no one wants to be around you.
Yeah, completely.
It's a balance.
So in terms of like just to wrap this whole thing up, from you having been working in a band environment for like best part of 20 years, for like any young bands who are like just trying to kind of work out what it's like working with these people, like working with the same people and being in the same environment all the time, and like trying to balance out your ego and the rest of the bands and giving space for some people to grow as well as making sure that you're delivering what you want to at the same time. Any pointers or any guidance for anyone?
Yeah, twofold advice. If you're a singer and you think you're great, go find 3 or 4 guys to play with that you think are even better at their instrument than you are at singing, and it will very quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Go
no,
find
completely.
go find 3 or 4 guys that are like the best at their instrument in your city, and put them in a room together and get them to lock up, and then start singing. Have them play songs you wrote and start singing over it, and you'll be like, oh, all right. Well,
Hmm.
I'm not as
So basically,
you
just
know
don't be the smartest guy in the room. Like you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. You always want to be
ever
around people.
surround yourself with people that are better than you. I mean, and I think I am I'm a massive Black Sabbath fan, and early Ozzy's like literally my favorite. He's one of my favorite singers ever.
Hmm.
But when you look at what the rest of the band's doing, as
Yeah.
great as Ozzy is, it's just like, well, look at those guys.
Yep.
So Ozzy could be the and you get the sense that he doesn't have this massive ego. When
No,
you
I
watch
don't
videos
see.
of them playing live, you're like, in fact, you really get the sense that none of those guys have a massive ego and that they're just working for the greater good of the song, and
Yeah,
they do
completely.
actually just they happen to be the best at their instruments.
Yep. No,
So
completely.
so there's that. And then I think if you're a band looking for a singer, find a singer who doesn't know how good they are. But they're good, but they don't know how good they are. Because
Okay.
if they know how good they are, it's not going to end well.
Is that where the problems start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yes, I think if you there's a very specific band that I'm thinking of, and I know you will think of them immediately in the UK, who has a singer that's fucking outrageously good, but also knows that he's outrageously good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And I think the band is also very talented, but
Yeah.
like if they had a singer in that band that was outrageously talented but did not buy his own bullshit,
Yeah.
they'd be a lot farther along than they are.
I think that's really interesting. Just before like we wrap up, is that people in the industry see that and they respond to that, and they don't try and help those people as much. People are much more welcome to are
100%.
completely humble, like especially like from the industry side of people, like whether it be crews or like at festivals or whether it be management or labels or whatever. If they can smell that on an artist,
Correct.
they're way
Yeah,
less likely to help them.
It's a fine line, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's only one Mick Jagger.
sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's only
Sure.
one of that guy.
Yeah.
Not everyone can be that guy. And from what I've heard, for the most part, he's incredibly professional, super generous and humble and
You
totally
don't do
cool.
it for 50 years if you're not.
Exactly. And you hear stories about him being super cool. And then you hear stories about other singers in bands that are less famous than the Rolling Stones, which is pretty much every band ever.
Yeah.
And you hear about them not being cool, and it's a bummer because at the end of the day, it's there's a guy. His name's eluding me right now, but he's a very famous Nashville session player. I think he's a bass player from the '60s in Nashville, and he said we're in the business, we're in the fun business.
Yeah.
And if you're not having fun, what are you doing? So
we're gonna go have some fun.
Yeah, let's have some fucking fun. I'm ready. Another fun chat.
Yeah, you enjoyed it? You think we're still doing good?
I think it's okay, man. It's fun. We're doing fine.
That's why are you on this British trail? I feel like you're doing it just to play with me.
I'm just fucking with you. Of course.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What do I have to do to get a break around here from you and Rob? It's just endless, man.
Don't know, buddy. Can't tell you.
All right, dude. Thanks for spending some time with me.
I'll
It's
talk
been
to
a
you
lot
this
of fun.
week.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Congratulations on making it to the end of another episode of Tour Talk. You can keep up to date with us across the socials at Tour Talk Pod, so that's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon. Please subscribe, comment, like, and share, and we will see you next week.